And it's up to D.
Hello, it's Donna Balzer back again with Facebook Live. Today, answering garden questions and specifically tree questions. But before we get to that, Ian, who is here with me yet again, thank you so much, Ian. I did it by myself last week.
You were great.
Oh.
Really good. Really
Ian wants
good.
me to show you the book. What are you doing? It's August. What are you doing in August in your garden? Well, I got to tell you, I am tearing things out. I have things that are completely finished, like my peas, gone, finished. So that's what I'm writing in my journal this week. I'm also doing some new seeding. I did some new transplanting yesterday with some lettuce that I found randomly growing in my greenhouse. So as I said, I'm totally thrilled to have Kevin Lee with me today. Kevin Lee is an arborist from Calgary. He has been working with trees hands-on, not writing about them, not talking about them. He has been working hands-on with trees for over 30 years, and I love that about Kevin. He is a Shigo follower. Dr. Shigo was a famous tree guy. Are you laughing at me, Kevin?
No, that was great.
He is a tree follower of Dr. Shigo, who is no longer with us, but Shigo was really big on the whole tree. That means a balanced tree, a tree with roots, trunks, and branches that are all in balance, because if you do too much pruning, that disrupts the balance. So Kevin's a fan of that. So if you have tree questions for us here today on Facebook Live, you must type them in. You can't phone me, you can't ask them, you have to be on Facebook. You have to type in your questions now. So start typing in those questions while I tell you. First of all, I should say hello, Kevin. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Donna.
Good to see you online. It's really fun.
Well, should we let the world know how amazing this is, that it actually is happening?
Yeah, well, it is amazing. The two of us, Neil, bad with technology. You have helpers on your side, I have helpers on my side. It takes a world to raise a village. It takes a world to raise two gardeners to the level of computers, right?
It's amazing. Like I always said, if it doesn't have leaves on it, it's not my job.
Okay, well, before we go to that and before we start with trees, but I hope people are sending us any questions about trees while we talk. I want to show you what's left. Can you see what's left of my prize winning? Can you see that?
Wow.
Isn't that big?
Hey, give me a slice of that.
I entered that in the fall fair at Coombs here on the weekend, and it won the best melon. And you know why it won the best melon?
It tastes good.
It was the only melon entered.
Oh, I didn't want to go to the default.
It's really hard to grow melons, and you probably know that. Anyway, it is actually not the best melon. You can see it's a pale color. This is how much is left. The kids have been eating it all night and this morning for breakfast as well. I have 3 grandkids here today, and they might come charging in at any moment. You never know. Anyway, they were eating it, but it's not right, because our first question actually comes from Mike Maxwell. He contacted me on Twitter. Is it okay if I go to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Mike Maxwell had this burning question because he lives in Medicine Hat. And of course, when you live in Medicine Hat, you are growing big melons, because that's melon country. It's hot there. And he wondered how he knows. Sorry?
The pumpkin capital of Alberta.
No, actually, that's up north.
Oh.
Yeah, the pumpkin capital of Alberta is up north, but that's another story. Mike is in Medicine Hat, and Mike was wondering how he knows. And you can't tell from the outside of the melon. Some people say you look, if it's yellow, it's ready, or if you knock it and it sounds hollow, it's ready. All of this is just BS. What you need to look for is the little tiny, it's a little piece of vine that's attached right to the fruit. When that turns brown, it's ready. So I knew this one wasn't quite ready because it wasn't brown yet, but it was my biggest melon, and it was 4 kilograms, and I had to bring it in. So that's enough about me.
That's the melon's life connection back to the leaves and roots.
That's right. So it actually, when it turns brown, it's finished. It's not going to ripen up anymore, and that's the perfect time to pick your melon. Mike, if you're listening, that is the perfect time to pick your melon.
Perfect.
Okay, here's a question for Kevin.
We have a question?
Yeah, there you go.
I have a question.
Can you see the question, Kevin?
Did somebody email us a question?
How do I prune my California lilacs into trees? Is it bad that they are growing into each other? Okay. Shrubs typically are multi-stemmed, and a lilac, of course, is a shrub. And so if that was something that someone had asked me to do, depending on the number of them, it's going to be a tough pruning job. If you had 10, 12, even more stems, and you cut it back to 1, You know, that's a tremendous reduction in leaves. So you can get away with it, but the tree is going to have a really strong reaction to that.
Strong
and-
reaction.
Sorry.
What does that mean, a strong reaction?
What I mean exactly by that is that back to what Donna was saying about balanced plants, you know, the roots, stem, and leaves of that lilac are in balance, they're growing synchronously. And if we take a lot of leaves away, it's going to feel that. It's going to feel that as a powerful impact, and it's going to react, have a strong reaction is probably what I said, in the sense that it will sucker profusely. You know, possibly the best way to do that would be to stagger it over maybe a 2 or 3 year period. But shrub material always suckers like crazy anyways. So if it was healthy and it seemed like it was going to get through it, you'd probably be all right. You could remove a lot of the smaller secondary stems, concentrate on your one, and then over the next several years, just keep all of the sucker growth totally cut right down to ground level, reduced, and voila, we've got a shrub, which
Now,
is
right now it's so
Yeah,
a
the
shrub. Right now it's hot, really hot. Is it hot there too, Kevin?
oh, we just had a record-breaking week last week, actually.
Right. So people don't want to you don't want to do pruning for people when it's too hot, do you? That's just not right.
No, a job like that, I'd probably wait until the fall.
Right.
Either that or roll through the winter and then do it, you know, early spring.
Yeah, do it a couple of times. Yeah, but don't do it all at once. Did you hear that, Ian?
Yes.
Don't go out tonight and try to make that happen. This is going to be a long process.
Let me just ask this back to that California lilac. We need to be a little more specific about that individual plant. How many, you know, little subtrunks does it have, and perhaps what size or diameter are they?
Well, first of all, there's 6 of them. They're all growing into each other. So there's going to be 6 stems, and they're going to create a kind of hedge, except the hedge is in a U shape, as it turns out.
Yeah.
Well, enough about Ian. You're gonna have to pay for an hour of your time, a consultation.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Submit an invoice here or what?
Kevin, you had mentioned to me, because I know it's a big problem everywhere, insects on trees. And in a lot of areas, scale is a real problem, especially in the city of Calgary. And I know you're from the city of Calgary. So scale on elm trees, scale on hedges like cotoneaster, it's gotten to the point where people are just tearing their cotoneasters out. But you haven't done that. Tell us about why your cotoneaster is still okay. What's happening? What's different at Kevin Lee's house than at, say, Donna's house?
The difference is that I actually don't have a hedge.
Oh.
Okay. It kind of looks like a hedge, but when you say hedge to me, I see a geometrical form.
Right.
A long rectangular shape that is used a lot of times to defend, define, or just, you know, work with the people like that at their property. The problem with hedging all plant material is that to maintain the shape of the hedge, you have to do a tremendous amount of pruning. If you take a single individual cotoneaster plant and plant it in the middle of your lawn, given time and maturity, 20 some years later, it would be a full 15, 16, 17 foot ball. They have a beautiful natural shape. And it's very rare to see a single cotone left like that because, well, it just doesn't happen very often. But what's working at my place is I have a hedge that's been abandoned. This is the classic story of the shoemaker's children. Okay, so I don't prune a lot at my house. I only do what's necessary. And so the previous owner and now us for the last 3 years, so there's at least 5 years here of what most people would call neglect. But I have room for it. There's room between both of the neighboring properties. There's room at the front where the street is. And so my hedge has, well, it's just gotten shaggy. And so the result of that is that I have a plant that is back towards its natural balance. What it wants, not so much what we want. It is strong. It has a tremendous amount of leaf mass. It has lots of good, healthy tissue in its stems, lots of stored energy, and it has the ability to defend itself. And so the scale is there, but just a little bit, and I don't get any major dieback.
Okay, so you're not getting big areas of that shrub dying back. Your cotoneaster looks good, even though you have some limited amount of scale on it.
It looks great. When you get up close, there is some scale that you can see.
Mm-hmm.
It's typically the hedge that you're defining that's getting chainsawed down to the ground. That hedge is completely covered with scale. You can't see the bark. That bumpy, silvery looking appearance, that is not the bark of cotoneasters. It is a brown, smoothish tissue which has lenticels on it, which is a breathing organ of trees and shrubs. But it is not gray. Honest, folks. That's great.
Well, that was an interesting story that you told me. I really liked that. I liked that letting a tree, and again, it's back to Shigo's balance, right? With the roots, stems, the trunks, the leaves, everything in balance. So that makes good sense to me.
Just let me add one more brief comment about that. My solution is not a working solution.
Yeah.
Most people want the geometric straight hedge.
So tell me, Kevin, what is it that an arborist actually does? In case I didn't define it at the beginning, I thought people would know, but Ian isn't sure. So tell people that might be watching, what is the job of an arborist?
You know, that's a really wide question. And it would be a similar question to saying, you know, what does a doctor do? Because there's a lot of kinds of doctors, right? And it's the same thing with arborists. And I don't want to make any comparison between arborists and doctors. I wasn't trying to do that. What I am trying to do there is,
Kevin.
I'm trying to say that, you know, there's everything from a really super smart person who has just spent a whole life in the books and teaching, somebody like Anita Scheel, right? That is a consulting arborist. She's at one end of the scale. The other end of the scale is, you know, guys working in bucket trucks, just cutting trees so that the power line is not going to be in danger, and everywhere in between. So all arborists have a blend of, you know, how much hands-on work they do and how much reading and research they've done and how much knowledge about what they're doing. A lot of kinds of tree work, you know, the best tool you have to do it is a good strong back and being able to put in a long day. Other kinds of tree work require, you know, some investigation. One thing that I've always found very interesting is, you know, why did this tree get sick? And you kind of, you know, it's a bit of a Sherlock thing. It's a bit of a challenge. You know, when did the new neighbor that put the soil sterilant on move in? Things like that, right? So, yeah. Arborists work with trees.
Oh, it's arborists work with trees. What type of arborist are you? What do you love to do? What do you wake up in the morning hoping to do each day?
My type of arboriculture, it's changed a lot through the years. But you could see, looking back into my history, that I was heading this way. I do two things. I've learned enough about Calgary's plants that I have a pretty good handle on what's wrong with them. That's a huge subject and no one knows it all. But, you know, after years, you've seen almost everything that's familiar. The other thing that I love to do is ornamental pruning, taking mugo pines and making them look like, you know, all of a sudden it got transported into a Japanese garden or something. So I really do love pruning pine trees. Turn me loose on pine trees, I'm pretty happy. But I do the same sort of work with all kinds of shrubs, apple trees especially. Fruit trees prune very well and be incredibly picturesque if pruned nicely. Yeah.
So you like to do the more ornamental, the more detailed pruning, not so much the takedown of big trees.
I haven't done any tree removal for a long, long time. Okay. Yeah, it's an awesome set of skills to have. And I really encourage all young tree men to, you know, do their logging sessions, the period in your life where you know, cut the big wood. You know, it's character building experience, and, you know, it just helps you understand the full circle of what arboriculture really is. But, you know, I never felt good about doing it. I was always very much a tree hugger and a tree lover, and I've never cut down a tree and felt real good about it.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
So, hey, Kevin, so when should someone call an arborist? Like, I might go out there and try and cut it myself. Like, when should I say to myself, no, you should not do that? Phone Kevin Lee.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be having to phone Kevin Lee, but phone, any arborist who's got some experience with trees. There was a rule that I'd read somewhere about, if you need a large ladder to do this, you probably shouldn't do it. If you need a chainsaw to do this, you probably shouldn't do it. Both of those tools combined can... Here in Calgary, as you know, Donna, there was a ferocious snowstorm in September of 14. And I guess one of the most interesting things about that was all the tree stories the guys got to tell each other while they were waiting for their treatments in the ER rooms. There was a huge spike in homeowner visits to ER because guys were seriously hurting themselves working on their own trees. Yeah. So it's like...
so busy that they weren't even taking new clients. If you weren't an existing client, they weren't taking you, right? I heard it got so crazy, so hard to get someone.
If you were an existing arborist and you had a reasonable business, decent clientele, the storm of the September of 14 would have just chucked that out the window. Normal life as you'd known it would have just gone away. Yeah, and that's what happened to me and many other arborists who had existing services at that time. Yeah.
So Kevin, not to discourage Ian because he has a lot of questions, but moving on from Ian.
Come on.
Moving on now. What is good for the garden about trees? What is in our gardens? Every week we do a section called "Good for the Garden," and I'm wondering, your point of view as an arborist, how is a tree good for the garden? It's a long pause.
No, it is a long pause because one of the main things that trees get into trouble for is causing too much shade. So a lot of the times with a young garden, somebody will start out with a nearly full, or at least at the most, semi-sun garden. You add 20 years and that tree hasn't gotten any smaller and you now have a shade garden. And so, apart from the beauty, the shade, the whole feel of having a nice tree or a group of trees in your garden, as the years roll by, they are going to very much change your environment. And sometimes, if you really do have to get some light, maybe it's time to take one of those old fellows out. Seriously, it just depends how important it is to you to keep a sun garden.
But isn't it true that trees can shade when you've got this intense heat? They can actually drop the temperature in your house. Like they can actually provide some cooling services. Isn't that good in the garden for some big trees?
It's nature's original air conditioning. Fantastic stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when people are planning ahead and they want something good for the garden, what would you suggest? Where should they plant it? Should it be dead south or should it be more southwest?
The old style, like think of like out west, the skies are big and the sun is hot and there's no shade. And typically people had their house facing south. And then there was a veranda perhaps, or a porch or whatever. And outside would have been a couple or three big cottonwood trees and beautiful shade in the summer, sun in the winter. And, that's an ancient pattern that is really hard to beat.
So that's another trick word for Ian. We're going to use the word deciduous. Those are the trees that lose their leaves. So really people should use a deciduous tree is really what you're saying, Kevin.
If you have a row of coniferous trees, coneberry.
Those are the ones that eat people.
That's right. No, that's a carnivorous tree, Ian. We'll get into that next week. But now we're into the triffids. I knew we'd get there.
I love that movie.
Anyways, trees that have needles their fruit is cones. So we call them cone-bearing or coniferous trees. That's the other major group of trees. And they do not lose their needles. They do, but some needles on some evergreens last for 30 or 40 years. So the point is that there's no, period during the year where there's shade. Yeah. So if you have a group of spruce trees in Calgary, we're famous for planting our blue spruce all over the place. And if you have a row of those on the south side of your house, you're going to have a really dark winter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So seriously, good for the garden this week is plant a tree that's a deciduous tree, not too big, but big enough to provide shade through some key windows and onto the roof, perhaps, of your house. That's good for the garden this week. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, that is definitely good for the garden. And it's all about the usage on your own specific property, right? Where's your deck? Do you want to hang out and have cocktail hour when you get home from work on a 30-degree day? Then during that time, that's when that tree should be in position to shade that deck. That's not hard to figure out, you know? Yeah.
That's it. That's good. Thanks, Kevin. That's really great.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions coming in, or should I plow ahead with another question myself?
You could ask the question, how far from the house should you plant your tree?
Oh, Ian has another question.
No, that's a Liz Parsons question. That's a Liz.
Oh, okay. There's a question that came in. How far from the house should you plant your tree? Have you got a general rule for that one, Kevin?
And again, that's a pretty good question. I would hear a tree that's very popular. A number of the same species are poplar trees. And poplar trees in the West, before people lived here, and you could think back and see what nature was doing, which is generally what's going to work there, and what it said is right, is that, you know, we had cottonwood trees growing in the river valleys. That's just very normal from you know, Texas to Saskatoon. Seriously, that's where the trees were found, and the reason why those trees were found there is because they have high water requirements. They could not compete or make it out in the grassland, which was on the upper edges of the valley, or up on the flats, which was the endless rolling Great Plains, right?
So how far from the house, Kevin? You're skirting around this question. How far from the house?
It has a lot to do with the species choice. If you have a water-seeking tree, generally either a poplar or a willow, I wouldn't plant it anywhere near your house. I mean, I'd go 100 feet away. Okay. I mean it, because the danger is that they're like little sniffer devices. They're just like these crazy creatures. And if there's water and they're like, okay, excuse the face stuff, but it just works. And they will follow that water and find it. And if that happens to be in a crack in the foundation of your basement, look out. Or if it happens to be in a leak in your sewer line, look out. You got real trouble now. Okay.
So what you're saying is no water-seeking trees, no willows, no poplars. So what?
Those are the two worst. Yeah.
So what? How far would you plant another tree, or what would be?
On the other hand, okay, let's just turn it around. I've seen endless examples of spruce trees that were cute little babies planted right beside the door, right at the eaves of the house. We're talking Mount Royal in Calgary, which is 100 plus years old, right? And here's this honking spruce tree 4 feet away from the foundation, and it's never caused a problem. Yeah, so because it's not an aggressive water-seeking tree. So species is everything. Yeah.
Oh, so interesting. I would have given some general rule. That is so smart, Kevin. Thank you for that.
It's just what's out there, you know.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So we've already done good in the garden. Now I want to do a learning segment because people really love trees. Like I know that Kevin, you love trees, and people buy their little tree and they take it home, and that's where things go wrong. And I think I've read some of your blog posts, and you're really trying to caution people on this next thing. So the learning segment today is about how to plant a tree. Can you give us some tips about how to plant a tree correctly?
Yeah, that's a great question and a massive subject. And the interesting thing about that is that it sounds like the simplest thing in the world, right? Just like falling off a log. Just dig a hole, stuff her in, we're good to go. We got to go golfing.
It does sound simple. I know people think it's nothing. They think you can
nothing to it. Yeah. And you know, just to be safe, it might be windy tonight. Why don't we just bury it a little bit deeper, huh? And you can't blame people for thinking that way. Most trees planted correctly, there is an anatomical feature. If you think about this, the bottom 3-4 feet of a trunk of a tree, it's the two sides, if you stand back and look at the silhouette, are running quite parallel. And then as you approach the ground, all of a sudden you get this wide flare, and you are moving towards an anatomically present aspect of trees called the root crown. And it's actually where, and there's a line, it's right there. Once you learn to read it, it's not easy. And I don't expect people to be able to just do that like that. But there is a line, a very specific line between the roots and the trunk. And when God plants a tree, he gets it right every time. Every time. That line is always at the existing grade. So the problem is that the roots are a respiring organ, okay? They don't feed themselves. Their job is to secure the tree in the ground, to take up water and to take up nutrients. That's what roots do. They form amazing fungal associations underground, but trees are reliant on the upper part of the tree for their energy.
So how do you tell where that line is, Kevin? If you're just bringing a new baby tree home from the store and it's really deep in a pot, don't you just plant it at that same depth that it's in the pot? This is people's mistake.
You know what? This is really tricky, and it's different every time. Another thing that causes problems is grafted trees. So there's a thing called the Bud Graft. And basically what you do is you take a little wee piece of root. Look at the size of those mitts. And you take, I better not do that. And you take a little wee stem that's going to be the tree, and you cut a little V notch in both. One's an arrow and one's a notch, and you stick them together and you put wax on it, and it's only the size of a pencil. And you get a prairie hardy tree. This is a specific regional type of grafting. So a lot of the times they've done that for the reason simply that they will use extremely hardy root material. Good to zone 2. Okay, maybe the tree is a zone 3 or a 3.5. I know that's
How does that affect how you plant the tree?
Because you might not see that the graft is not the root crown. Sometimes these are 6-8 inches above the actual root crown. The root crown, again, is the flare, the start of the flare. So if a lot of
the tree, you can see that?
I can see it.
So when people take a tree home from, as a learning segment here today, when they take the tree home from the store, should they actually take it out of the pot and pull away some of the soil? Would that be helpful?
There's a lot of different techniques, and people sell trees a lot of different ways, but there are lots of trees that are too deep already in the pot. Okay. Yes. Yeah, definitely.
So you take it out of the pot, you look for the root flare, and you plant it at exactly that spot.
If I did what you just said, I'd do it really carefully. And I would start at the top, and if I started getting into lots of roots, I'd stop. And I'd plant the top of that root ball that came out of the pot at grade. You got it, at the existing grade. If there was 6 inches of soil just sitting in the top of the pot, hiding the flare, the root crown, then I'd take all that off. And the trick is this, is that even professional nurserymen and landscapers have gotten out of the habit of staking trees. Trees have been staked, in other words, mechanically supported with guy wires sometimes, and or a steel post beside the root ball, and you've tied some sort of support line, wire, string, whatever, to the tree so that it won't blow over. And most trees, if they're planted actually at their root crown at grade, are a little flimsy feeling. Yeah.
So this is why then it's tricky. In other words, how to plant a tree is very tricky. Make sure to look for that flare. Make sure to plant it right at that point. Now, Kevin, we're almost out of time. Did you have anything else that you really want to share with us today here on the Big World Live? Is there anything about people to know?
I would seriously take 5 minutes and Google the term root crown. There's some amazing stuff will come up on the net, and you can actually get some, pictorial description of what you're really looking at and get it right. It's trees that are planted improperly sometimes sulk for 5 years. The root system is not functioning. It's suffocating down in the soaking wet clay, and that tree could die 5 years later. What a waste of time. Nothing ever happened that wouldn't have had any decent growth above, because plants always work like roots first, right? You know that. Everything from a lettuce to a redwood. No roots, no tree, no plant, right?
Now, Kevin, people are going to be very fascinated with how they can get a hold of you in Calgary. I know you work just within the city of Calgary, but you've given us some really good general principles today. But if they want to reach you in Calgary, what is the best way to do that?
That's right through my website. It is small case krltreeservice.com. And you can snoop around in there, but if you want to cut to the chase, you just go to the contact page, and that baby is hooked right up to my email. So I'll get your message for sure.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And all the tree lovers and tree huggers out there have learned something really important. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks a lot for having me, Dawn. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. Okay. See you next time.
All right.
See you later, Kevin.
Thanks, Ian. Great job, buddy.
The disembodied voice goes.
So are we still live?
Hi.
Are we still live, or we got our own show now? Stop camera.